as we inch closer and closer to the beginning of the 2025 season, there are some players that could radically have their value changed. And I want to look at 8 players that I'm keeping a close eye on that I think could rise significantly in value or maybe fall depending on how things go this season. Let's start off with one of the hottest names right now, and that is the running back formerly known as Croskey-Merritt, also known as Bill. Now, everything has gone in an uproar since the rumor happened that Brian Robinson could potentially be traded or even potentially cut from the Washington Commanders. Well, so far we haven't seen anything happen yet, but that's still something that's very much a real possibility. We saw him gain a ton of value overnight, and it sure didn't help that he scored a touchdown on his second run of that preseason game. That being said, I do want to offer a little bit of caution. Yes, do I think he's a solid player? Yes, I think he's a good player. Do I think he's one of the top 32 running backs in the NFL? No, I do not. Bill Croskey-Merritt could have a short-lived window of success. We've seen it out of other guys that are not necessarily special running backs like Rachaad White, James Robinson, Mike Davis, Cordero Patterson, all guys that over the past 5 years have been running back ones that maybe didn't necessarily have a running back one type talent, but were in the right situation at the right time with the right volume. We could see that out of him this year, but I'd always rather get away from somebody like that a little too early rather than being a little too late to the game. So if you're a contender and you want to ride with him, I think he's a good player to potentially have there as a 1 to 2 year window type guy. But more realistically, if you are not a true contender that needs running back help, I'm more than happy to give him away for a second and a third. I think would be totally fine. Next player I want to cover is Skattebo. This is a name that was really, really hot during the draft cycle and then even in the offseason. But because of his injury during preseason, we haven't heard as much about Skattebo. Well, he did get to play in this most recent preseason game, and it wasn't necessarily how he played. I mean, it was fine. 3 carries, 12 yards, 4 yards a carry. That didn't really matter much. What mattered was that he only ran the ball 3 times. They had him in on the first 2 drives, and then he was done. He was out. I think they wanted to get him some run in a game, but I think this indicates that they have some pretty big plans for him, and he's going to be playing early and often. So I think this race with Tyrone Tracy is closer than maybe some other people suspect, and I think he could be taking over that job if Tracy falters or if Skattebo looks really, really good early on in the season. Let's talk about a veteran name. This is going to be one of the more well-known names we talk about here, but David Njoku. Yes, this is the tight end for the Cleveland Browns. It's been around for a while now. But why are we talking about him here? Well, the big reason is because Joe Flacco was named the starter. If you go back to what Joe Flacco and David Njoku did 2 years ago, and during that stretch run, he was averaging over 20 points per game at the tight end position. Far and away, the tight end one if he were able to sustain that over an entire season. Now, we don't necessarily expect that for an entire year, but even what David Njoku did last year with any quarterback not named Deshaun Watson showed that he's actually a very legitimate upside candidate here with a fairly safe floor. And we're seeing all offseason these guys riding around in golf carts together, goofing around, joking around. I think there's real chemistry here, and he's one of those players that could shock as, man, David Njoku ended up being a top 3 tight end this season. Yeah, he's one of those guys that you can get fairly cheap in kind of that no man's land of tight end that could actually finish very, very high. Pat Bryant is somebody that I am keeping a close eye on. The Broncos were willing to deal Vele in a deal to the Saints, which was really, really interesting because, yes, they got good draft capital back for him. They got a 4th round pick. I think that was good value. But that being said, that was somebody that was potentially holding Pat Bryant back. Now that you got rid of that bigger bodied receiver, this really opens the door for a Pat Bryant to come in pretty early and be able to contribute. We're still going to have to wait and see what happens with Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, but Pat Bryant drafted in the 3rd round this year. This opens the door wide open for him to walk through. And even though we like Courtland Sutton, we know he's an older receiver that is not going to be around forever. They're looking for their long-term replacement. We like Mims, but he can't play that same style of game that a Courtland Sutton can. Pat Bryant can. So this is somebody that could come contribute early, but even long-term could end up having some good value. So I like him as throw-ins on trades, or if you haven't done your rookie draft right now, to target him in the third round. Let's talk about Ollie Gordon, the running back for the Miami Dolphins. Now, this guy was somebody 2 years ago we were talking about as potentially the top running back in the class. Yes, that's the same class that has Ashton, Jeanty, and Travion Henderson and Amari Hampton and all those guys. We were talking about Ollie Gordon potentially being the top back in the class. Now, obviously, that wasn't correct, but he's looked fairly good here for the Miami Dolphins. And with Jalen Wright not performing as well as you would kind of hope, and Devon Achane being a little bit banged up, this could spell really good news for Ollie Gordon. I still think, obviously, Achane is going to be a huge part of this offense, but in a perfect world, they want somebody to take away some of that between the tackles grinding. That's what Ollie Gordon can get. And if he can get in the end zone, which this is an offense that's shown in the past, they can do it when everyone's healthy. Ollie Gordon could end up being one of those 4th, 5th round steals that you took in your rookie drafts just a few months ago. So I'm keeping a close eye on him. He's another player that I would love to get as a throw-in on trades. I'm not saying Jalen Wright's dead, but Ollie Gordon right now looks like he could be the real deal. Go to another veteran player in Tank Bigsby. So far, everything we've seen in camp, everything we've heard from the coaches, everything is pointing to Tank Bigsby being the lead back. But not everything's necessarily reflected in that yet. When you look at best ball ADP and different things like that, Tank Bigsby still being fairly disrespected. I want to keep a very close eye on this. Now, it's not normal that a guy that's a holdover becomes the main guy for a team, especially when they use draft capital. But everything we've been seeing indicates that Tank Bigsby is likely to be the main beneficiary of this running back group in Jacksonville, which should be a much better offense than we've seen before. One thing that really surprised me, we even saw some designed pass plays potentially for Tank Bigsby, which is something that we never thought we would see, that he would just be a first and second down grinder. If they're willing to use him a little more heavily than that, Tank Bigsby could come out of nowhere and have a Kyren Williams-like ascension. We go from one of the bigger names and the more well-known names to a guy that many people probably haven't heard of, Efton Chism. That's right, Efton Chism. He's a wide receiver, undrafted guy from the New England Patriots. And we've seen the New England Patriots take undrafted wide receivers and make them something special before. That being said, this is a wide receiver room that overall is extremely, extremely wide open. And we heard the buzz in camp, and then we started to see it in preseason. When those two things go hand in hand, you have to start feeling pretty good about your chances. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that this guy is a super priority add in your leagues or anything like that. And in fact, there's probably a lot of leagues where he's already been scooped up. And this is not necessarily a redraft thing, but in Dynasty, he is a name that if he's on there on the waiver wire, I am absolutely prioritizing going to get him, because right now, I think that he could end up ascending into a legitimate role for this wide receiver core. And in Dynasty, yeah, we usually don't get anybody on the free agent wire that's available to actually help us. So he's a name that I'm keeping a close eye on. Efton Chism, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Last but not least, this has been one of the darlings of the offseason. He's risen so much since we've had the NFL draft. Despite him being a first-round pick, his stock continues to rise. You would think, well, first-round pick, it already should be high. Nope, it's rising even higher, and that's Emeka Egbuka. Everything we hear and everything we see shows Emeka Egbuka is going to be a star at the next level. But then you add in that Chris Godwin is coming off the pup. We don't know exactly when he's going to be ready. And we also see that Jalen McMillan is going to be missing some time. Emeka Egbuka is going to be getting the ball early and often in this offense, and he could quickly ascend to the number one receiver on this team. And let's remember, this was a very pass-happy team that ran a lot of plays last year. Baker Mayfield is going to sling the football, and I think Emeka Egbuka, rather than later, is going to be a fantasy football wide receiver too, with the upside to potentially eventually touch that wide receiver one stratosphere, which is really, really difficult to do. We know not a lot of guys get there. Emeka Egbuka has the talent and the situation together to potentially reach those type of heights. So I love Emeka Egbuka, and I think he's the truth long-term for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you're ready to take your Dynasty team to the next level, I have the perfect deal for you. We are now offering our full bundle. That is everything that we have to offer here at Dynasty Nerds. The GM tool, which not only will let you see how your team looks, but the rest of your league and as many leagues as you have. There's tons of tools inside there, including mock draft tools, trade browsers, trade calculators, looking at the overall league strengths and weaknesses. You'll have it all there. But on top of that, you'll also have our film room that looks at all of our rookies, our nerd score, extra podcasts, everything. And we're giving it away as cheap as we can right now. Up until kickoff of the first game of the NFL season on September 4th, you'll get this for 30% off if you use YouTube30, promo code YouTube30 at checkout. Head to dynastynerds.com right now. Use promo code YouTube30 today.